Great, thank you so much. I'll talk fast. So I'll say next slide.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the March 28th, 2024 Design Review Board meeting. It's 5 o'clock. Mr. Lawyer, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Weil,
Here.
Board Member Thalman,
Here.
Board Member Gibbs,
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon. Here. And Chair Sheridan,
Here.
all here in attendance.
Thank you so much. Mayor Slater, would you do us the honor of coming to the podium and leading us in those beautiful words of the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you very much. Please join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much for that. The meeting procedure tonight will be as follows. The first item of business will be public communications. Any member of the audience that would like to address the board on a matter not on tonight's agenda will have 2 minutes to do so and a maximum of 15 minutes. Following that, we'll have the consent calendar, which consists of the meetings of the March 14th meeting of the Design Review Board. Then we'll have modification of agenda order and the regular order of business will follow. Tonight's regular order of business will be item 5.1, 54 Lagunitas Drive, a request to table. Item 5.2, 1536 Morningside Drive, a request to continue. Item 5.3, 622 Bluebird Canyon Drive. Item 5.4, 950 Baja Street. And the last item of the evening will be item 5.5, 705 Marlin Drive. So at this time, would any member of the audience like to address the board on an item not on tonight's agenda?
Good evening, board. My name is Steve Kawaratani. And Don, I'm going to take the time not to call you Chair Sheridan. Thank you for your service the last 4 years and the last 2 years as chair. Greatly appreciated by us who are in this industry, for better or worse. And Chris, welcome back. You were missed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kawaratani. Now on item 1.1, I will turn this over to Ms. Dobson.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to present Chair Sheridan with a recognition of thank you for your wonderful service as a design review board member. We are sad to see you go. We're sad that it's your last night, but if you would all join us in a round of applause for Chair Sheridan.
Thank you.
Chair, would you have any objection if each of the members of the board can say a few words?
Please go ahead.
This is your last. To be continued after the board. This is hard for me to see him go. I'm on this board in a substantial part because Don came up to me and said, there's an opening. I think you'd be good for it. So it shows how bad of a chair he is to pick somebody like me. But the first time I went on a site inspection before I became a board member to see what it was like, the certitude, the knowledge, the ability to really see the factors, the knowledge of the guidelines, I was kind of blown away. He was made not only to be a board member on this board, he was made to be chair. When I got on the board, he was a mentor in the early years and always there for questions. We did talk a lot on process, procedure, trying to make things better. He put in the time, he put in the effort, and he put in something that probably is his biggest contribution, and that is wisdom. And for that, I really think not only am I grateful because I'm thrilled to be on this board and having served with Don for a year, but the city of Laguna Beach should be incredibly grateful, including the architectural community, the applicant community, and the neighbor community, because he has really served this community extremely well, and he's going to be sorely missed. So great job, Don.
Thank you so much, Tom, for those very kind words.
I'll echo those comments, Tom. I think that was beautifully put. Don rules with a firm hand and a velvet hammer is what I like to say in government speak, so to speak. And we're going to miss you terribly. You've been a great chairman, and I, for one, will miss you a lot.
Thank you, Chris.
What can I say, bud? I not knowing you 4 years ago and then having COVID and everything go to town and, you know, you get on the board and we're not here in City Hall and we're all trying to figure it out. And you jumped right in to not only be a shining star for the board, but, you know, a service for the community. You really took a lot of passion, an amazing amount of organization for the Design Review Board. You taught me some things along the way as well. And it's been a pleasure serving with you and getting your insights and your perspective. That's why I'm happy to call you a friend, and it's been fun to be your colleague.
Thank you, Louis.
So a lot of you guys I don't think recall this. So Don and I applied for being on the Design Review Board at the same time 4 years ago. There were 13 applicants to fill 2 seats. I was the first one interviewed. He was the 13th one. And I got to sit through the entire interview process and was a little cross-eyed by the end. Don came in, was so colorful, made everybody laugh. He lightened up the room. The moment that he was finished, he bolted out of City Hall. I couldn't get out of my chair fast enough. I bolted out of City Hall too. And I was like, Don, I'm Jessica Gannon. Nice to meet you. And we've been fast friends ever since. Joined 2 peas in a pod, joined at the hip. You've been a phenomenal teacher, mentor, both on the dais and off. And I can't thank you enough for your friendship and my teacher. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Sure. Sure. Do- We come down? Oh, I have it right here. Thank you.
I think we will be getting photos.
Well, those are very kind words indeed. And I have to say, from the bottom of my heart, this is the finest board, the most hardworking board I have ever served on. As Louis said, we started in COVID and never missed a site visit, never missed a Zoom meeting. We were told some of the craziest things about not being able to go into houses and see houses. We did anyway. We had masks, booties, hair nets. It was pretty wild. And this board persevered through all of that, and the hard work it does, and it's just unbelievable how hard these people work. And it's an honor to be the chair, to serve them. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for a great ride. It has been an amazing experience, and I appreciate you all and will never forget you. So, is there any member of the audience that would like to speak to the board tonight on an item not on tonight's agenda? There being none, we'll move on to our consent calendar. Tonight's consent calendar consists of we have the meeting minutes of the March 14th meeting. I'm correct. Sorry about that. So Do we have a motion to accept the minutes? Any exception?
Chair Sheridan, I'll move the minutes as proposed.
And I'll abstain. I was not there.
Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Delia, please call the roll.
Board Member Weil,
Yes.
Board Member Thalman,
Abstain.
Board Member Gibbs.
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon.
Yes.
And Chair Sheridan.
Yes.
It's a 4-0 vote for approval.
Thank you so much. Now we'll move on to the modification of agenda order. Would any member of the board like to modify tonight's agenda order? There being,
Chair, I would suggest that the long item, which is Baja 5.4, be put at the end and Marlin be moved up to 5 ahead of that.
switch 5.4 to 5.5.
Yes, in other words, switch them.
So we'll make Baja 5.5 and make Marlin 5.4. Any objection to the agenda order modification? There being none, the agenda is so modified. That will bring us to, on regular business, that will bring us to item 5.1. This is 54 Lagunita, Design Review 221823, Coastal Development Permit 221822, and Variance 221824. The request is to table the project for a new single-family residence in the Lagunita zone to provide staff with additional documentation. Would any member of the audience like to address the board on the property at 54 Lagunita Drive regarding their request to table the project? There being none, do we have a motion?
Chair Sheridan, I'll move item 5.1 at 54 Lagunita Drive as requested for tabling.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? There being none, Ms. Delia, please call the roll.
Board Member Weil,
Yes.
Board Member Thalman.
Yes.
Board Member Gibbs.
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon.
Yes.
And Chair Sheridan.
Yes.
That's a 5-0 vote to table.
That brings us to item 5.2, 1536 Morningside Drive. This is a request to continue the project to April 11th, 2024 to allow sufficient time for staff analysis. Would any member of the public like to speak on the request to continue for item 5.2 at 1536 Morningside Drive? There being none, do we have a motion?
Chair, I'll make a motion to continue item 5.2 at 1536 Morningside Drive to April 11th.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Salmon and a second by Chair Pro Tem Gannon for a second. Any discussion on this motion? Ms. Delia, please call the roll.
Board Member Weil,
Yes.
Board Member Thalman,
Yes.
Board Member Gibbs.
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon.
Yes.
And Chair Sheridan.
Yes.
It's a 5-0 vote to continue.
That brings us to item 5.3. This is 622 Bluebird Canyon Drive, Design Review 23-2072. Do we have applicants present? While the applicants are taking their seat, ex parte, please.
Chair Sheridan, I met with Robert, the homeowner at the site, and
I previously met with Mr. Slater, the neighbor, and spoke with Rob Glugman and Carolyn Fox on the phone.
And I visited the site and spoke with Mr. Slater over the phone.
Chair, for this hearing, I spoke to Mr. Klugman over the phone.
And I had previous site visits in contact with Mr. Klugman and Mr. Slater. Do we have a staff presentation?
Yes.
Good evening, Chair Sheridan and members of the Design Review Board. My name is Jessica Mendoza. I will be presenting item 5.3. Item 5.3 is a request for design review approval for modifications to the roof of an existing single-family residence with a 2-car garage in the R1 residential low-density zone. The project was last heard on February 8th, 2024. The Design Review Board required the applicant and adjacent neighbor to communicate about possible alternatives to address the water ponding on the roof and to ensure view equity is considered and achieved. The applicant has explored various alternatives and has determined that the proposed project is the preferred alternative. The applicant is prepared to discuss the alternatives. He emailed the board. Staff would like to also correct the directions that were noted on the staff report. The applicant requests design review to raise a portion of the roof approximately 7 inches on the west side of the roof with a slope of a quarter of 12 downward to the western side of the roof, where the east portion of the roof will be raised approximately 1/2 inch. The eastern side is what's closest to the adjacent neighbor's residence, which is the 1/2 inch. Just some brief site history. In 2006, there was during the re-roofing process, the highest point of the roof was raised by approximately 6 inches to create a roof pitch. The adjacent neighbor filed a complaint with code enforcement at the time. The applicant was advised at the time to undergo a design review process to obtain approval for the height increase or to remove that roof pitch. The applicant did not pursue design review for approval of that roof height change and instead chose to restore the roof to its original height and configuration. In 2016, design review was approved for to allow a 499 square foot addition. In 2023, a permit was issued for a re-roof concerning the pooling of the water on the roof. There was a change in roof height and the applicant was referred to administrative design review at that time on December 20th, 2023. View equity concerns were raised, therefore the project was then forwarded to the Design Review Board for review. And in 2024, the Design Review Board heard the project on February 8th and deliberated view equity. The applicable design review criteria is view equity. Prior to the last meeting, there was inclement weather and ocean views were difficult to see. Staff believes that the proposed project is a reasonable request to provide insulation and a sloped roof in order to address the water pooling because the ocean views, including the horizon line, are still intact to the adjacent property. Staff recommends the Design Review Board to approve and adopt Resolution 23-2072, approving Design Review 23-2072 for modifications to the roof, subject to the attached exhibits, and to adopt Section 15301 categorical exemption pursuant to CEQA. This concludes my presentation, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mendoza. Do we have any question of Ms. Mendoza? There being none, we'll turn the meeting over to the applicant for 5 minutes.
Thank you. There we go. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm here in person this time as opposed to on the phone. And I think it just makes sense to just add a touch to what Jessica said. I, as a citizen, I understand. Is it not loud enough? Too loud? No. Okay. I do understand the need to balance property development rights versus view equity, which is in the DRB code. And while technically, since the roof was raised 6 inches under DRB, and there's a sliver of view at issue, but this isn't really an exercise of development rights. I'm not developing my property. I'm repairing a problem. We had extreme ponding that's only gotten worse over time. And we executed a repair that brings the property up to code. That 6 inches that was mentioned in 2005 or 2006, I forget, that's not a coincidence. That's what we raised the roof so that we could get it
to be equal to code. Over the last 20 years, we've had a cycle of, and it's, my roofing expert can talk to this more, but there's been ponding of water, which is normal on even the minimum code required 2% roofs, but it gets worse on a flat roof that's not up to code. And it's a vicious cycle. You have some ponding of water, that weight depresses the roof further, ponds it more, depresses it further. This has gone on for at least 20 years, probably more, which is why the owner 20 years ago tried to fix it. I did mention the code of 2% slope for built-up roofs under California and Laguna Beach. There's also a requirement under Laguna Beach Code and California Code to maintain the roof to proper safety. And that's not proper safety. If you look at the amount of water and the weight of the water, it was just, it was a scary amount, according to every contractor I spoke to, according to every roofer I've spoken to. As I mentioned, there's no aesthetic or development goal, purely a roof repair to bring it into code. I've discussed both these items with lots of people in town, including most recently Dennis Bogle in the building department, who was also, he was surprised this was going to DRB for a 6-inch rise and a repair. And just for perspective, my iPhone is 6 inches. This is what we're raising the roof on one side down to 1/2 inch. That's what we're doing to keep the ponding. It's the minimum required. We're not doing in a millimeter over it. There's been some discussion as to why we did it in that direction. Well, the roof had, I think I've explained to a few people, the roof had a very small slope. It wasn't completely flat, but it had a very small slope, maybe 1 inch over the 25 feet, going in the direction of Mr. Slater's house. So in order to raise the roof by the minimum amount, we had to go, we put it on top. If we wanted to keep that 2% slope and go against the grain, we would have had to raise the roof by at least 1 inch more, probably more than that. Another factor was there are gutters on Mr. Slater's side. There are no gutters on that portion of the roof on the west side of the house. So if we were to change it to the reverse slope, which, by the way, I should say, Mr. Slater, both in 2005 and in the last meeting, was arguing for a flat roof, completely flat, no repair whatsoever. But if we were to try and reverse it, we'd have to add gutters and downspouts on the other side, which might affect other neighbors and certainly would affect the cost. And by the way, just doing the entire roof over again would basically be the same cost. And then, of course, the last but not least, is, if I could have like an extra 30 seconds, maybe, I know time. Last but not least, the reason was the plans in 2016 that were approved were in that direction. So we just said, well, let's go with the approved plans. Why go against what was already approved by Design Review Board? I think I know I'm running out of time. I think that's it. I would just say one last thing. Last time there was a couple of mentions. I mean, I've had cordial conversations with Mr. Slater. Last time I did get a chance to rebut several times where he mentioned that this was illegal construction. As if we, under cover of night, just put this thing up. No, as Jessica explained, we got permits for it. There was some confusion over it. There were inspections, there were postings, and then it got later referred to Design Review Board. So this was not some illegal, sleuth that we tried to pull a fast one. So, just finally, as a citizen, I thank Chairman Sheridan for his service, and hope that the wisdom that Mr. Gibbs said he has spreads to the entire board, and I can repair my roof and avoid the risk. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Klugman. At this time, would members of the public wish to take the podium and speak on the project at comments are addressed. Yeah, on 622 Bluebird Canyon. Mr. Slater.
Good afternoon, board members, and thank you all for your service. I know it's a big time commitment. So the good news is I've gotten to know Mr. Klugman. I like him and his wife, his family, very nice people, and there's been good discussion back and forth. But we're here because, oh, by the way, if I could have an extra minute, I would certainly appreciate it.
Extra minute.
Okay, thank you. We're here because the administrative design review staff thought that this project adversely impacted view equity. A goal of the Laguna Beach land use element is to, quote, maximize the preservation of coastal views consistent with the principle of view equity from existing properties and minimize the blocking of existing private views. My understanding is that the principle of view equity relates to new development or additions. The reasonable opportunity to develop is not being denied here. This is just a re-roof of a structure built 56 years ago. View equity was achieved when the previous owners of the property worked with me to minimize view impacts when they added a second-story master bedroom in 2016. At that time, they moved out and gutted the entire home, making its new effective build date 2017 per public record. With all that construction, the flat roof was not sloped. It was just re-roofed at that time. Further, the city's design guidelines state as a goal, quote, avoid cutting into the horizon line of a neighbor's view whenever possible. This roof, and I admit there was no intentional illegality done. It was a mix-up at staff. The permit that was issued was not the permit that was applied for. So he is correct about that, but it's very unfortunate. But the roof as it exists cuts into my horizon line on the front deck and from every room all the way to the rear of my home, as demonstrated by 4 photos from all those rooms, which were taken by Laguna Beach staff and outlined in your staff report. I respectfully disagree with the finding in the proposed resolution, which states that the coastal view from existing properties, mine, is being maximized. Again, it was Laguna Beach staff who drew lines showing how the horizon line was cut when the last attempt was made to place a pitch on the roof in 2006. That was a 6-inch increase of the roof height, wherein the peak was in the middle of the home and not on the horizon. You can see the huge cut made in the horizon. What is currently installed is it was previously said at 7 inches, maybe it is 6, increase at the horizon line. I have to take issue with Mr. Klugman stating that I had misconceptions about flat roofs being required to have a 2% slope per California building codes. This may be the case today, but it wasn't the case when this home was built. In fact, Mr. Klugman has since agreed that this home was built with a completely flat roof, and I have an Eagle View report provided by a third party to prove that, and flat roofs pond. I have a completely flat roof over my guest home in Orange, also built in the 60s. Mr. Klugman's home has been just fine for 56 years, as has mine. The ponding is not a recent occurrence. I've observed it on his roof since I bought my home 21 years ago. I'm almost done. The roofer I recommended to Mr. Klugman, who he refers to, also takes issue with his assumption. I have a letter from him confirming that the original roof was flat with no slope. He also says the ponding demonstrated in Mr. Klugman's photos are normal. So here's the bottom line. When we last met on February 8th, we were asked to reach a compromise. We have tried, but a compromise cannot be reached without the present roof being somehow modified. As stated in the staff report, the proposed project is still Mr. Klugman's referred alternative. I have suggested to Mr. Klugman a reasonable compromise to address his ponding concerns. It would be to reverse the slope of the roof so that the horizon view is restored. I would additionally request that the slope be reduced slightly so that the maximum height closest to my home is 4 inches instead of 7 inches. Otherwise, please deny the project and return the roof to how it was originally built 56 years ago. And I just have some attachments that I'll pass along. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. Any further speakers on 622 Bluebird Canyon? There being none, we'll return to the applicant for rebuttal. 3 minutes.
Well, I'm not sure how much to rebut, other than I'm not sure how we can insist on me making a code violation. This is putting the roof flat or putting the roof at below the building code in Laguna Beach, just because it was erroneously done at some point. I'm not sure how it makes sense to force me to go below code again. Going in the other direction, so the reason just one clarity, we did put it up 6 inches. We put for 7 inches, just in case at some point of the roof, it was 6 1/4 inches or 6 1/8 inch, just so we had a little bit of wiggle room in case there was a problem. We didn't want to get caught on another technicality. So it is 6 inches. It would have to be probably 7 or 7.5 to make that 2% slope if we started it from Mr. Slater's side. So now we're talking about the severe pooling, which is a risk. I don't know how anyone can look at those pictures and think it's not, other than if they don't own the home. We're talking about a sliver of a view, and now we're talking about the sliver of a view, because raising it 7 inches as opposed to 6 inches might actually be a little bit worse, but if it's better, it's a fraction of a fraction. So that's all, and nothing more.
Thank you, Mr. Klugman. We will now proceed to discussion and deliberation, unless there's questions of Mr. Klugman. And please.
Okay, let me start with,
Quick point of clarification, close the public hearing.
yeah.
Yes, well, the public hearing is now closed and will return to the board.
Okay, this is for Jessica or the city attorney. When the permit was issued, and when he applied for a permit to do this, the existing roof, and when the permit was issued, were they required to comply with the 2% slope, or was the flat roof or some, almost flat roof grandfathered in? Or do you know?
I know.
Can I please?
I apologize. I'm just trying to
My
help.
question's to them. I'll come to you in a
My
second.
apologies.
Hi, it's my understanding that the permit didn't describe a slope. It didn't describe the pitch on the roof, and so that point wasn't clarified. But in speaking with our building official, a flat roof usually is required to have a minimum 2% slope.
So I guess this is for you, Alicia. Here, this house, I think based upon at least some of the testimony, was originally approved as a flat roof. It's an old home. There are a lot of flat roofs in town. When an applicant comes to re-roof, do they have to comply with code? In other words, make it into a 2% slope? Or do you know?
Well, generally speaking, if there is a modification to an existing condition and there is a change in the building code, when there is that modification and change of condition, you have to bring the project up to current code. There are some exceptions to that. In some instances, I don't know if this is one instance where there would be an exception. I have not looked into that. But most generally, when a permit is applied for some change in a feature, the feature has to be brought up to current code.
Okay, Mr. Klugman, before I go to my next question, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, and I did send out to everyone the copies of the permits from 2005 and 2006, and they did specify the slope. So you might not have seen them. I did send them to everyone, so it does. I have copies if you need. It does specify 2%.
It does specify a 2% slope.
Both in 2005 and 2006, it does.
Okay. And so then it wasn't constructed that way. The permit called for a 2%?
No, so I don't know what happened. I don't have the records back to 1969, which is when around I think it was built. I have the records that we got when we had to, I don't, the construction company got all the permits from, I guess, that are online, and I think they go back to 2005. I think the online ones go back to 87, but I don't think there was anything between 87 and 2005. So the last page of 175 pages of permit applications is 2005.
All right. Is there a way we can see that 2006 permit? Does anyone know where it is where I can?
I have
I-
copies if you
I
need.
can pull up the permits while you continue.
Why don't you
your
pull it up and
deliberation.
let's see where it says 2%?
I mean, at the end of the day, code is code.
No, I understand.
Chair Sheridan, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please. Member Weil?
When we had spoke at the last year, we were talking about alternative styles or adjustments to the roof. And when we met, you said you and your roofing company looked at several different options. Can you walk us through those choices? I mean, you sent us an email, but walk us through it and why the preferred choice, how you came to the preferred choice being the one that's submitted.
Well, there were a couple of middle grounds, each one with an issue. One would be to raise the roof by about, it was probably about 5.5 inches in the middle of the roof and have it slope both ways. So that maintained, that maintained a 2% slope in both directions. Again, you got to go a little bit higher when you're going towards the ocean than when you're going, because you're going against the grain, against the flow. Again, the problem with that is you still have to add all those gutters. Same problem adding all the gutters, and you have to rearrange everything underneath. And it was compounded by the fact that it was unacceptable to Mr. Slater. So we didn't really pursue that. There was a third one, and it would save maybe an inch. And then the other one that probably would save 1.5 inches. I think it might have been 1.75 inches. I got to look at the email, was if you had the slopes in 3 directions, but then you'd have to add even more gutters. So imagine like you're doing a big top, you're raising it so that the center point is in the middle and all the water goes on different sides.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry just to fully answer your question. And then there was one last one where we considered, where I asked about drains, putting in drains instead, and given the amount of water, it would require probably 2 to 3 drains. It would require pipes running through the middle of the living room because there's not enough slope. And so that was just, we couldn't live with that one, any kind of pipes running through our living room.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
in short, the alternatives were within 1 inch or so, or 2 inches of adjustment in variable locations.
Yeah, as done by the computer aided design that Mr. Decker's firm has.
Thank you for doing that. The email was helpful.
It's tough to read. I apologize.
Louis, are you done? Okay, can I resume? I think this answers it. Amber, could you put it up? And as you can, just highlight the description. This appears to be the permit, the final permit that was issued. And it does call for a 1/4 to 12, which is a 2% slope. And it was constructed apparently, and I want to get your confirmation, Mr. Klugman, pursuant, but you weren't around, but apparently it was constructed, and the evidence is it was constructed pursuant to this permit. For some reason, apparently, it did not include the slope that was required by the permit. So my question to you, and I talked to you about this today, when you did your roof repair, or the roof replacement, if you will, you took it down, you didn't take it down to the plywood, you took it down how far?
Well, and again, I spoke to Mr. Decker about this before. There's basically underneath the plywood, there's maybe a 1/4 inch of asphalt and padding. So we just said, well, why take that? It's only going to weaken the roof. We're not putting we're not putting material that's really waterproof. We're putting just insulation because it's the lightest material that will harm the roof the least, and a top coat. So we just put that on top of the existing roof.
Right. So you didn't change the slope of the roof. Rather, what you did is you built it up on one side so that it slopes toward Mr. Slattery's property.
Right, and we did it we did it on that side because that was
Yeah.
the least. Okay,
No, I get it.
and I apologize for the interruption.
No, I totally get it. I think you've answered my question. The second question I have is, it's unclear to me if the increase in height on the ocean side was 6 inches or 7 inches. What was it?
Okay, well, so the roof slopes about 1 inch. This towards Mr. Slater's house. Before we did anything, it slopes about 1 inch over 25 feet, which is about 0.25%, so it's close to zero, not 2%, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry for cutting you off. We've been going on a long time and I just have this. How much did you raise it on the ocean side? 6 inches or 7?
6 inches.
That's all I need. Thanks.
We have further questions of the staff? Any objection to going to deliberation and discussion? Let's do it. Who wants to lead off?
I don't mind.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gannon.
Thanks for the investigative insight. Okay, it's so ridiculous. We're talking about such a small lift in the roof for structural integrity, something that was already approved prior. It feels insane to me that we're here discussing this and mitigating on it, but we are. So as far as like the design review criteria, so we've got the pattern of development for that section of Bluebird. When you look at Mr. Slater's and then to the uphill side, Diana Navarre, and there's like 4 or 5 houses that when you go inside those homes, they're not looking to the left and over top of roofs. Their entire view is out the back of the property. Unfortunately for Mr. Slater, he's got his master bedroom back there, but it's unobstructed, this incredible, beautiful view. So in my mind, that's considered view equity that's been achieved. View equity does not get preserved in guest bedrooms. It doesn't get preserved when you walk into an entryway and there's one little view. It gets preserved in primary living spaces, that's living rooms. A lot of kitchens have open kitchen living room with the view. Those views get preserved. Not a slither of a little view that, I'm sorry, when you have an incredible view out the back of your home. So view equity has been achieved. And at the end of the day, this is creating structural integrity for the property, pattern of development, view equity. That means at the end of the day, it meets the design review criteria and staff supports it and I support the roof as is, no changes.
Go next.
Ms. Thalman.
Chair, I can support this project tonight. Again, I agree with the board member Gannon. I think this is a very simple situation. And I do have some experience with a similar problem at my own home, and I know the damage that can happen with pooling. Not to speak the health and safety issues, because it is a mosquito breeding ground in the summer if it stays long enough. So from the health and safety standpoint, I think this is a reasonable fix. The 7 inches, there's no impact on view to neighbors. I agree with your assessment, Jessica, and it meets all the design review guidelines, so I can support it tonight.
Mr. Weil.
Yeah, I can concur with my colleagues. I can support it this evening. I think in hearing one, there was just so many issues of history raised that it created a lot of confusion to try to understand what was going on. So I appreciate staff's effort to really outline the history more clearly for the board. Appreciate the applicant for looking at the alternative options and showcasing those choices, because at the end of the day, the board needs to opine on whether, regardless that the roof's there, but what were the choices that could have happened and would it have been nominal? And I can concur with their findings that The adjustment of what Mr. Slater's looking for, he's still looking out over roof lines, but he can still see at certain vantage points the horizon line. So that there is still elements of that does exist and is still afforded for his property. It might be just a smidge higher, but I don't find it to be unreasonable because the history in the file indicates that this was the slope and the code changes then, and what we're being shared from staff and stuff, that this is the code compliant repair and maintenance to the property that should be afforded to the applicant. And so I can find that to be consistent. Where else was I going with that? It's very similar to like when code changed railings from 36 inches to 42 inches, right? People come in, they've got a 36 inch drawn. Nope, you still got to get to 42 inches. So I don't see that you abuse trying to exceed, trying to do your minimum design and application to make your repair. I see it as a repair and I can support it this evening as it meets the design review criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Weil. The
Chair.
well, we haven't.
He's been trying to forget me for a year now.
More? Is there more discussion? Go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to give my deliberation.
Please.
Okay, so my issue with this one is that the work was completed without going through design review, and not intentionally. And I said that at the last hearing, but it did occur, and the neighbor did not get notice and an opportunity to object. And so the process was short-circuited. Again, not intentional. Secondly, views, particularly peekaboo views, I think are important and are worthy of protection in my mind. And the applicant was kind of denied the opportunity to show us really what the impact from raising the roof 7 inches in that corner would be. That said, it is view equity. So, my one thought was, well, take off the roof and let's stake it and see what would make the most sense. But the roof's already done. And I don't think it's fair to Mr. Slater to deprive of him that. The question is that given what we know, how would it have resulted in any different result? And I have kind of a preliminary issue, which is before we can get into a view equity, the issue of the 2006 permit, which I wanted to get to the bottom of. And thank you, Amber, for assisting me. This was originally permitted as a 2% roof going in that direction. That was in 2006. And in reality, I think what you're doing here is fulfilling the 2006 permit. Moreover, the process that went into that permit makes a great deal of sense. You need a slope. Now, as I mentioned last time, I've dealt with flat roofs before. It's a maintenance issue. There's a lot of buildings that have flat roofs that just go through increased maintenance. But it's far better to have a slope roof. Moreover, it's required by code. I think in light of the 2006 permit and the fact that this was not an intentional violation, and all things considered, that I think it would be likely that we would have approved it anyway, given the sliver view and the fact that the view remains, that there is some view. It wasn't a total block out of view from the rooms, which again, I do value those peekaboo rooms. I think all of those considerations lead me to supporting the project. I intend to do so tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The staff report, this is an excellent staff report, Ms. Mendoza, and the explanation of view equity is particularly consistent with my thinking. The looking at this project de novo, first time, clear eyes, as if this project had come to us as a first hearing, then I think all board members would agree that view equity has been achieved because we don't block out the horizon line view. And as we said so many times before, there's view property and there's property with a view. And many of us have some small amounts of view with our property. And as long as that horizon line is not blocked by the improvements, then view equity has been achieved. So I concur with the comments and I concur with the staff report, and I'll be supporting the staff's recommendation tonight for approval. So that having been said, gentle friends, do we have a motion?
Chair, I'll make a motion to approve 622 Bluebird Canyon Drive. I motion to adopt resolution DR 23-2072 and approve DR 23-2072 and findings said action exempt from CEQA under section 15301.
I'll second that motion. Any discussion? There being none, Mr. Lawyer, please call the roll.
Board Member Well,
Yes.
Board Member Thalman.
Yes.
Board Member Gibbs.
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon.
Yes.
And Chair Sheridan.
Yes.
It's a 5-0 vote for approval.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mr. Klugman. Thank you, Mr. Slater. We've had a change in our agenda. So our next item will be item 5.5. This is 950 Baja Design Review 23 dash. Oh, excuse me. We're doing, sorry. 5.4. Yes, 5.4, 705 Marlin. Design Review 24-0174. Applicant present.
Ex parte.
Yes, let's do ex parte.
So Chair Sheridan, I met with Steve Cortani, drove by the site, scared the snot out of a couple contractors that were there. Show up with a clipboard.
I did the same, but I didn't scare the contractors.
I was about to say the same thing. I had a site visit, met with Steve Cortani.
Site visit and met with the general contractor, William Dalkey.
Yeah. And I did a site visit. Has anybody seen how big Mr. Dalkey is? He scared me. So that's my ex parte. Mr. Wank, do we have a staff presentation?
We do. Good evening, Design Review Board and members of the public. Item 5.5 is a request for design review at 705 Marlin Drive, located in the R1 zone. The site is currently developed with a single-family residence. The staff report had erroneously identified a conflict of interest with Don Sheridan. Staff has reviewed the conflict of interest maps and confirmed the chair is not within the 500-foot buffer area. The board previously reviewed and approved Design Review 22-2114 on January 26, 2023 for lower level additions, upper level additions, a deck addition, landscaping, parking space, tandem parking, roofline modifications, exterior material changes, window and door changes, and exceedance of the allowable building site coverage. This project was approved with several conditions, including that a 6-foot-high solid non-reflective privacy wall be erected on the south-facing side of the deck off the master bedroom with staff to verify. This approval was later upheld by the City Council with additional conditions on April 18th, 2023. The proposed project includes modifications to the previously approved design review plan, including roofline modifications to the previously approved parapet wall and construction of a hipped roof, shown here on the proposed front elevation. The project also includes an alternative 6-foot-high privacy wall consisting of a glass panel partially across the width of the deck off the master bedroom as seen in the proposed side elevation. Staff has received concerns regarding a window being added as part of the proposal. Staff reviewed the DRB approved windows against the elevation proposed and did not find any new windows added. A comparison of the front elevation previously approved through DR as well as the currently proposed front elevation are shown here for reference. The proposed project includes the removal of the parapet wall and inclusion of a hipped roof as shown in the proposed front elevation. As described in the staff report, removal of the parapet largely results in a reduction in the height and improvement to the view equity. Staff had received a concern regarding an upper level addition. However, this scope was included in the prior design review approval. As shown on the proposed front elevation, the removal of the parapet wall effectively reduces the proposed roof height, allowing for additional views shown here in blue. The modification does result in a 10.57-inch height increase at the highest point of the proposed ridge, shown here in yellow. One public comment had identified the circled area on this slide as a deck with guardrail. However, the rendering shows a shed roof in this location, which is not proposed to be modified as part of this proposal. At the City Council hearing on April 18th, 2023, the council conditioned the approval of the project with the requirement that the plans be revised to reflect the original garage footprint. The City Council's decision did not require removal of the addition at the upper level. The proposed project also includes a 34 square foot addition at the lower level. As shown on the DRB approved plan, the proposed addition is in keeping with the original footprint proposed. As seen on the current proposal, the proposed support posts will not be impacted or will not impact the approved third parking space as they are set back from the proposed addition line. Due to concerns received, the proposed lower addition was flagged. This addition was previously determined to not require design review. It is less than 50 square feet. However, staff has the discretion to refer items to the board and recommends that the board consider the addition as part of this project scope. Staff has prepared an updated resolution with revisions to include reference to the third proposed modification, as well as the analysis of the proposed 34 square foot lower level addition. Staff conducted an analysis of the proposed addition and finds the proposal consistent with the design criteria as reflected in the updated resolution. Staff has received 2 letters from neighbors with concerns regarding the proposed project. Staff recommends that by motion, the board adopt resolution number 24-0174 as modified, approving design review 24-0174, and finding said action exempt from CEQA under section 15301. That will conclude my staff summary, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wank. Do we have questions of Mr. Wank? There being none, we'll turn it over to the applicant for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Sheridan. Good evening, board and staff. I had promised myself when this project got approved, after going to council twice, I would never discuss this project again. But here we are. And I'm hoping my good friend Christina isn't prepared to speak this evening either. So we'll just cut to it real quickly. But one more note. This is where I met you, Tom. I had a mask on. I had been exposed to COVID, I thought by a really close friend. It was just a cautionary thing, but COVID was still amongst us even 18 months ago. So, oh, look, there's my slide. So I think that's in front of you. We're here this evening to discuss a modification to the roof. On the top is what the Dodgers are proposing. They want a bit more of a traditional look than the roof that was approved below. So that's one ask. We're not going to be taller at the ridge than the original roof. Next slide. We're also asking that the privacy panel be pulled back. This is something that Christina objected to because primarily if it comes all the way across, it blocks the view looking out towards the ocean. And the board had a bit of a mixed feeling on this, as did council. And next slide. So as of last Saturday, that's the deck in question. The panel would go across. And if you look beyond the deck, this is what you're seeing. Now, it's my understanding that perhaps a couple days ago, this hedge got groomed in time for the design review board hearing. But, you know, frankly, I don't see a need for that privacy panel. And I believe I heard Garrett say that we are discussing the small addition to the bathroom. That was a drafting error. When I was representing the Dodgers at City Council, Council was very clear that they were not going to support the extension of the garage, but they had no issue with the extension of the bathroom so it could be usable. So a drafting error occurred. We went to 2 council meetings and I didn't catch it. And so that's why we're back to get permission on this 38 square foot addition to the bathroom. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quaratani. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Members of the public who wish to speak on the project at 705 Marlin, please come forward for 3 minutes.
Bring that comment about the trees being trimmed. I'd like to submit this letter from my homeowner's insurance company, the inspection they did 2 months ago, and the letter which they told me how to trim my hedges. One. The other one I want to hand is the pre-existing view they had when they purchased their home from the multiple listing. And then the last thing is we're going to talk about the compromises that were made to get their whole project approved. They use these as compromises to get them. This is what.
Mrs. St. Clair, could
I
you
know.
hold on a minute? Timing
giving you
is,
some things
timing
to-
is 3 minutes.
Okay, I know.
Hand everything you have to hand out to Ms.
Okay.
Delalia.
All right,
And Ms. Delalia will put the timer on for 3 minutes.
sounds good.
Thank you so
Sorry.
much.
Okay, so good evening, board members. My name is Susan St. Clair, and I reside 766 Kendall Drive, adjacent to the 705 Marlin. For me, this has always been about an invasion of privacy. On January 23rd, the DRB agreed that there was an issue of privacy, and it was a 4-to-1 vote. The DRB conditioned these items for approval, 90% VT on all windows, the minimum, 6-foot-high, solid, non-reflective privacy wall to be erected on the entire southwest side of the deck. Material to be verified by, at that time, Russell Benham. Raising of the window sills, which they completely removed without a single permit, $1.5 million worth of work. And this was one of the items that caused an issue. The single no vote was cast because the conditions did not do enough to mitigate the privacy issues. On appeal, City Council agreed that there was a privacy issue, so much so that they applied a stricter condition to the approval and required the height requirement for the windowsill to go up to 30 inches in a 5-0 vote. And they upheld the DRB's privacy wall as depicted, displayed, and approved by the DRB in January of 2023. Tonight, you're being asked to reverse those decisions that you voted on and approved by you and the City Council. These modification requests did nothing to address or protect our privacy, which the collective conditions were intended to do. It is disingenuous to offer compromises to get approval for other aspects of a project, only to renege on those compromises and retain what was garnered. This makes a complete mockery of the process. I ask this board to reaffirm its decision and the decision of the City Council and reject the applicant's request. If you approve those modifications, our home, their forever home, you will take away and change my home forever. The thing about the trees is that, yeah, I have a hedge, but my hedges are the way they are, and I put protection. Now, I've had to mitigate these issues for over a year. I see people on scaffolding. This has been going on for 3 years. I'm trying to do what I can to mitigate my privacy, and I have an obligation to my insurance company to trim my hedges in a certain way so they don't drop my policy. And you can see by what they're asking me to provide for them. So I would like nothing more than this to end. It has been a nightmare for me, my family, and the neighbors. And so please have them stick by what you have already given them to do, and just, you get what you get and you don't have a fit. Let's just put this to an end. I'm exhausted. So I appreciate your time, your help, and I thank you. And I know you'd like this to end as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. St. Clair. Next speaker, please. Any further speakers?
Hi, I'm the neighbor across the street from the Dodges and the St. Clairs. And frankly, I've been to the St. Clair house many times, and this privacy wall is needed, both for audio and privacy, and for protection, frankly. I've been forced to witness a lot. That's all I'm going to say. And this is very much needed.
Thank you so much. Further speaker?
Hi, John Vella. As Loretta and the St. Clairs have stated, it really is about privacy with that privacy wall on the deck. And the staff report really should have recommended that the DRB uphold the city council recommendations that included the privacy wall. The staff report should also have highlighted that the proposed roof line changes are just part of what is being modified here. The second story, the 5-foot extension on the second story was never staked. That did not exist. And I asked tonight that if one of the board members would ask the staff to put up the original staking plan, you'll see the thick black line on that staking plan that is inside the existing footprint of the home, because the original parapet wall in that location across the back of the front of the house at the driveway was inside the eave, because the eaves were going to be cut off. It was never staked 5 foot out into the driveway at the parapet height. The staking today reflects the new drawing, but that 5-foot extension was never part of the design. And if it had been, and the supports that are there, those 2 steel supports that are there, that would have been included on the drawing as part of the traffic and parking study that was done for that 3rd parking space. That post sits there right now. You can see it. It's already installed. So, and Garrett mentioned there was not a new window. There is a new window that's in this extension that, according to the drawing, is situated in an existing closet. And I'm wondering why a window that large needs to be located to a closet space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vella. Further speakers on 705 Marlin?
Hi, everyone. My name is Donna Wilczek. I'm a neighbor at 724 Davis. I have been watching this house get remodeled over a couple of years. And frankly, I sit here in these sessions and I wonder, why would people want to live in Laguna Beach and have to live with us? So there's that. Secondly, I just have a question for the room. If I'm standing here looking this way, I can see you. If I move over just a little bit, I can still see you. So when there's a window right here, and then there's privacy glass, I'm not sure what that privacy glass achieves at all, because there's a window right here. So it's a really interesting concept. And a privacy wall dealing with audio, I just would love to see the science behind that. If you took a decibel reader anywhere, this would legitimately be proven to be false. And maybe it's my scientific background that makes me stand up here and just shake my head at all of this. But I just ask this board to just please end this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilczek. Further speaker?
I'm Bijan Jalali. I live across the street from this project on Kendall. We have, like everywhere else in Laguna Beach, the remodeling is ongoing. It's happening all the time to many houses, and people start by getting permits. They discuss the issues with the adjacent neighbors. They bring in their inputs and they adapt their plans, and then they apply for it and get approval, and then they start executing the construction. But this project was the most chaotic one in our neighborhood. It started full blast, 100 miles per hour, on changing many of the windows, enlarging the regular size windows to floor-to-ceiling doors and adding a balcony and many other things that have been discussed here. All of this without concern to the privacy of the neighbors, the adjacent neighbors, and without even applying for a plan. This goes back 3 years ago. The 3 adjacent neighbors complained about this and voiced their opposition from the beginning in the different meetings as we went through in design review and city council. And the decisions were made at the end to, there were a lot of oppositions from us, the 3 adjacent neighbors, but mostly all the unpermitted construction remodeling was approved with very few modifications. I'm going to focus on 2 of those modifications. One is this privacy wall that is on it was supposed to be on the south side of the added balcony. And the other one is to raise the sill on the adjacent window that was enlarged quite a bit to 30 inches. And I'm just, this was approved in March 2023, was repeated again and emphasized in April. And it is something that has been approved and it doesn't need to come up over and over again. Please don't reward this behavior of bringing up the same issue that was approved before over and over again. And this is not going to give a good lesson to the. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Denali. Further speakers on 705 Marlin? Last call, further speaker? We'll close the public hearing. Return to the applicant for rebuttal.
Thank you, Chair Sheridan. I don't want to re-litigate things that we looked at before. And so I'm not, I agree with Mrs. St. Clair. We need to move on. The board needs to move on. The Dodgers need to move on. Don't think that the roof is a big issue, nor is that bathroom. If you made the site visit and went on that deck this week, there really isn't a purpose for that screen. It was a political decision. So I'll just come out and say it. And you're not going to be looking back in that direction. So the Dodgers asked former director Weiner if they could revisit this. And he said, of course you can. So that's why we're here, putting the other issues aside. Is this a correct decision, reducing the size of that privacy panel? And I believe it is. You're depriving the Dodgers the opportunity for a view from their bedroom if that extends out the entire length as was approved. So thanks for your consideration. And to quote Tom, thanks for everyone's collective wisdom.
Thank you, Mr. Quaratani. Do we have questions of the applicant? Shall we enter discussion deliberation?
Want me to start?
That'd be great.
This was my first site inspection, but I wasn't on the board. And I did see the St. Clair's house. You might remember me. And I did see the Dodgers house and what a mess it was. And it was a mess. And I watched the hearing before DRB and I watched the city council hearings. So I'm pretty familiar with this project. So let me go through. I think the roof is a no-brainer. It's an improvement. It reduces mass scale. It meets all the criteria. You're in no way precluded. The Dodgers are in no way precluded from that, from the prior hearing. I totally support it. The bathroom, no-brainer. it is, whether it's an error or not, there's nothing I saw from any of the reports that preclude requesting, and it clearly is a needed cleanup. And it does not violate in any way the prior ruling. And just so it's very clear, once you get a project approved, doesn't mean it's stuck in mud. It can't move, it can't be changed. And we do get changes to come back to improve, to clean up missed things. That falls into it. So let's get to the privacy wall. What strikes me, and one of the public comment was, why is the privacy wall there? You look at what the city council did, as I understand it, was to raise the sill of the window. You can totally see from the master bedroom into the St. Clair's on that side, from the inside. And the privacy wall actually blocks a view from the bedroom that jets out to the left of the St. Clair's property. So it even has less impact on privacy than the windows that have been approved by the city council. I look at the St. Clair's from a view equity situation. Their view is incredible. The Dodges have very little ocean view, very little. And this, again, looking at it from the bedroom, gives the Dodges not a view into the backyard or to the side yard of the St. Clair's, which is not their primary deck area. I think it was used for barbecue. Their barbecues on that side, as I recall. Their view is in the back, and it's incredible. The Dodges have requested this so they could have a view from their bedroom that the privacy wall, which in my mind, I probably candidly would approve eliminating it or reducing the height across the whole deck. But that's not before us. It is to provide a little bit more open space there that further removes it from a privacy impact on the St. Clair's. I think it's very little to ask for an ocean view for the Dodges that's limited, particularly by the St. Clair's, who have an amazing ocean view. One of the probably the more outstanding ocean views in the community. I don't see a privacy issue. And finally, I don't see any preclusion from the prior board hearing, or excuse me, city council hearing, nor anything inconsistent with this, with what the city council did. And I saw those hearings, and I think that the video that the St. Clair's showed, I think, or it might have been Mr. Vella, acknowledged what the project features were. But again, there was no preclusion. They did not address that privacy wall, and there was no preclusion from making a change there too. So bottom line is I totally support this project. I think it meets all the guidelines, and view equity is achieved, and privacy concerns are little, if any.
And I can echo what Board Member Gibbs had to say. I guess the only thing I have to add is, this panel, I wasn't in favor of it the first time around, and I don't subscribe to politics. I have a very pragmatic way of thinking, a sensible way of thinking. And so I support everything that Board Member Gibbs just had to say. And at the end of the day, these improvements add curb appeal. They bring enhancement to your community. So why would you combat that? Why would you not be here supporting that with all your heart? I don't understand it. So I plan to support these improvements this evening as well, and I support staff's findings. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gannon. Mr. Weil?
I concur with my colleagues. I think this project's been a long-winded mess. And it makes sense to be coming back for modifications to kind of clean up some of the mess and what was agreed to and just try to get going. I mean, the parapet roof was horrible to begin with, and we tried to get it removed and it stayed and parts stayed, and yeah. So the new roof, I think, is much cleaner. It doesn't impede views like the parapet did. And even that was small. I mean, we clearly defined the parapet had no view equity issues, and I still see this having no view equity issues. As far as the bathroom goes, it's still within the setbacks and meets building code and general things. It was something that we approved prior, so I have no concerns with that. As far as the privacy element, it was probably it's a good application that we use from time to time. But in seeing where the project's at now and the buffers being much more, solid between the hedges and the distance between the property, I could be in favor of removing above the railing, as alluded by Board Member Gibbs. Because it is balanced. It's supposed to be neighbors are able to achieve a view and be respectful. And I think the components of where it's been modified and brought back into conditions that were prior from the bedroom windows. I think just some smaller applications more than acceptable and reasonable.
Mrs. Baumann? Thank you, Mr. Weil.
Thank you, Chair. I've been struggling. This one is just, it's confusing when you go with the back and forth between the city council direction and some of the changes that have made. I don't have any problem with eliminating the parapet wall and the hip roof. I think that's an improvement to the design. The one thing I'm struggling with, and there's a paragraph in the staff report that basically section D where it says activity since city council's 2023 decision. And it said subject to the following additional more restrictive conditions of approval. And that was 1, revise the plans to reflect the original sill height, which was 30 inches, I believe, and require that height. And then number 2, revise the plans to reflect the original garage footprint, which was done. And then the next paragraph says, indeed, the city council, when upholding a design review board decision, is authorized to make the conditions of approval more restrictive. The city council did not intend to make the project less restrictive by reducing the length of the 6-foot high privacy screen. If had so intended, it would have found an error or an abuse of discretion. And that paragraph is haunting me with regard to the privacy wall. So I can approve everything else. I would like to see the privacy wall stay. I think from what I've seen, and I'm sorry I didn't get to the house this last time, but from what I've seen in the past, I really think that the privacy issue that the St. Clairs have brought up may be, in fact, an issue for them. And as long as that hedge is there, probably not. But if that hedge ever goes away, there could be a privacy problem. So with that, that's my only concern about the project. And so I guess with that, I'd be a no.
Thank you, Mrs. Baumann.
Chair, can I add something to
Yeah,
my
please.
comments? I'd like to thank Mrs. St. Clair for the photos that were provided that reminded me of when I walked that street numerous times and analyzed the neighborhood. What those photos show me is that on that one little strip, everybody on the North Hill side has a deck that are staring directly at their homes. There's no privacy hedge. There's no privacy. They're all just looking down. The upper house is looking down at the lower house. And this house, the Dodge's house, has the most beautiful, thick, vibrant privacy hedge that when this is all said and done, I'm going to email you, Steve, to ask you what that species is, because I'd like to have it at my house. I've never seen a privacy hedge more with more girth. And anyway, so that's all my comments.
Chair, may I just make a comment also in response to Board Member Thalman's comment?
Please.
Briefly. My view of the way that what happened at City Council and relates to that comment, which I hope maybe brings a little clarification, is that the city denied the appeal of the DRB approval except for 2 more restrictive conditions, neither one of which dealt with the privacy wall. So they imposed two conditions on this project that I would not feel comfortable changing, even though maybe technically we can change. I would not feel comfortable changing in light of the city council's imposition of those two requirements, unrelated to the privacy wall.
So
Putting
just
that-
for,
Let me just real quick.
Okay.
Finish, and I want to hear your comment, Chris. So with respect to the rest of the project, including the privacy wall, it's just like any other approval by DRB, which any applicant is entitled to come back and request a change. If the applicant does request a change, which is being done here with respect to the privacy wall, we, I think, are entitled to consider it anew with all the factors and the guidelines we have, which is, I think, what we're doing tonight. But I think, in my own mind, just for clarification, I don't think anything the city council did impacts our review of the privacy wall aspect of the previously approved plan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gibbs. Ms. Delal, could you please, could you bring up the pictures on Marlin, please?
well, maybe I can ask staff, just to,
Okay.
just so, because I might change here. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. In the staff report, that the city council, there was 5 items that they addressed, right? Correct? And one of those was keep the 6-foot-high wall. And that was later changed by city council?
So the design review board required a 6-foot-high wall.
Mhm.
In the plan set approved by the design review board, it was shown as going all the way across the depth of the deck. City council did not change that. They did not comment on the width. They only required, they stayed the decision that it should be 6 foot high. So what you have before you tonight is still 6 foot high, but it's 2 feet wide as opposed to 5 feet wide, 10 inches wide.
Okay. That clarifies.
Are you clarified?
Yes, they were just upholding the
Dahlia,
DRB approval.
Could you bring up the pictures of the deck? Thanks so much. So this is the deck, and we're looking at Mr. Dalkey. Mr. Dalkey is a little bit more than 3 feet wide, 2 feet wide. And as you can see, as where he's standing on the deck, this would be the request for 2-foot privacy at 6 foot. This would be representative of basically Mr. Dalkey. He's over 6 feet tall. So this is a good representation. If coming out the 2 feet, this would be that would be the privacy part. And then, as you can see, the St. Clair's hedges as they exist a few days ago are this way. So no, I don't see any reason to extend privacy deck further than the 2 feet. The other items that were requests, the roof change, the bathroom change, absolutely make the project better, and I'm fully supportive of staff's recommendation for approval tonight. So, do we have?
Want me to make a motion?
Please make a motion, Mr.
Okay.
Gibbs.
I move that the board adopt resolution number 24-0174, approving design review 24-0174, and finding that said action and approval are exempt from CEQA under section 15301. Fedora?
Oh, to attach the
Modified.
resolution to
Sorry, thank you.
as modified.
As the resolution was modified, do I need to summarize what the modifications are, or just say there was?
No, just as posted in the staff report.
Okay, as modified per staff report. That do it?
Second?
We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Lawyer, please call the roll.
Board Member Wile,
Yes.
Board Member Thalman,
With the clarification, yes.
Board Member Gibbs.
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon.
Yes.
And Chair Sheridan.
Yes.
It's a 5-0 vote for approval.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the applicants. Thank you, Mr. Dalkey. Thank you, Dr. Dodge. That will bring us to
Chair, can we just take a 2-minute break?
bio break. We'll be back in, we'll be back in 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll come back to order for item 5.4 tonight, 950 Baja. This is design review 231274. Applicant team is present. Do we have ex parte?
Chair, I visited the site multiple times, met with Steve Coratani, and this time around, I had the absolute pleasure of meeting Mrs. Borelli.
Chair, I visited the site multiple times. I met with Karatani. I also met with Anthony Smith, Paige Lyle, Emiliana Borelli, and Aisha McGuire.
Same for me.
And I visited the site, communicated with Steve Coratani, spoke with Paige over the phone and Amelia.
And I did multiple site visits, met with Mr. Smith, Mrs. Lyle, and Dr. Borelli, and spoke to Mr. Coratani. Do we have a staff presentation, please?
Good evening, Chair Sheridan and Design Review Board. This is Kate Kazama, Associate Planner. And the last item before you tonight is a request for a new single-family residence, attached four-car garage and an accessory dwelling unit at 950 Baja Street. As a reminder, this is the third hearing for this request, as the project was originally heard by the board in November of 2023 and most recently in January of this year. Tonight is the third and final hearing for this request. The board initially heard this project on November 9th, 2023, and after receiving public testimony regarding concerns related to neighborhood compatibility, view equity, and privacy, the board provided the direction shown in the slide before you. The board's primary direction was to reduce the overall mass and height of the building, push the dwelling further away from the street, remove the spa on the third level, and improve the project's compatibility with the neighborhood. In response, the applicant had reduced the second level by removing the elevated planter area, reconfiguring the deck, and adjusting the building walls. The third level was pushed back as well by eliminating the spa and reducing the overall deck size. The width of the structure was reduced by 1 foot on the south or right side of the dwelling. Opaque glazing was added to the north or left-facing bathroom window. The building color was modified to a tan color, and overall 495 square feet of floor area was eliminated. During the second hearing, the board provided additional direction to further reduce the mass and scale of the building by making further reductions on the third level and lowering the height of the structure, as well as to address the privacy concerns of the neighbor directly north. In response to the board's comments from the second hearing, the applicant has further revised the project by 1, reducing the plate heights on the middle and upper level, resulting in an overall 1 foot building height reduction. 2, further reducing the west or front elevation on the middle and upper level. 3, obscuring the windows on the upper level of the north side elevation with frosted glass. 4, obscuring the windows on the east rear elevation with opaque glass at the hallway and bathrooms. And 5, incorporating a frosted glass privacy buffer on top of the proposed perimeter wall along the north side property line. A condition of approval has also been included to lower the height of the wall to a maximum height of 4 feet within the front yard setback for compliance with code standards. And this next slide is just a comparison of all street elevations from all 3 hearings. I'll leave this up for a few seconds. Since the posting of the notice and the agenda packet, staff has received public correspondence from 17 properties. It should be noted that staff is aware of additional changes to the project that the applicant intends on sharing for the board's consideration. If the board determines the revised project properly addresses the board's prior direction and is consistent with the design review criteria, then staff recommends that the board approve the project. This concludes my presentation. Both staff and applicant are available to address any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kazama. Do we have any questions of Ms. Kazama? There being none, we'll turn it over to the applicant for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Sheridan. My name is Steve Coratani, and good evening. In fact, I'll wax nostalgic for the last time. This is the last moment for me to say good evening, Chair Sheridan. Thank you again. And good evening to the board and staff. I want to thank the board and I want to thank the neighbors for meeting with me this week. I think it was productive. I also want to acknowledge Kate's excellent staff report. What I'm going to focus on real briefly is her analysis of neighborhood compatibility. She based her analysis on the acknowledged pattern of development that is Baja Street and Arch Beach Heights as a whole. And I understand that a vacant lot is not only challenging to the neighbors and to the board, but it's also challenging to the applicant. When a house is designed next to a vacant lot, that does not preclude the right for an applicant to design a reasonable home with similar program needs. So could we start the slides, please? Next one. So this is a composite. There's a little legend up there. Red indicates program reduction and blue shows on the 3 affected elevations where glazing has occurred. So number 1, staking has been corrected since the second hearing. There was an inadvertent error at the second hearing, so it didn't appear we had moved the project back as far as we had designed. Number 2, the structure was reduced by 1 foot. That's the maximum we can go without the need for a mechanical pump. Number 3, additional opaque glass was added and the window sills were raised. 4, glass security panel was added on the north elevation. And 5, windows will be high performance glass to reduce glare and light transmission. Next slide. We had a surveyor come out to verify that our distance on the project as proposed today is identical as far as the edge of structure and edge of deck. We're not an inch in front of 940, nor are we an inch back. Next slide. At the request of Board Member Weil, and after I had an opportunity to visit Dr. Morelli, we moved the entry stairs as far back as we could. And if you look at that diagram carefully, we moved it back 17 feet. That was done for 2 reasons. We were able to create 2 planter areas, and those darker round circles back towards the street are a tree that you're familiar with. We're going to use it as a hedge. It's Arbutus compacta, or dwarf strawberry tree. And in front of the trees will be a complementary Chinese grass. And then in back of that, along the stairways, I'm proposing horsetails. Again, this will provide privacy, and I'm not sure we're going to continue to need the glass railing. Next slide. I was also asked by Board Member Weil, and again, after I visited Dr. Morelli's, to remove the wraparound aspect of the deck. So that rectangle that you're seeing is 9 by 4, or a reduction of 36 square feet to the deck on the middle level. Next slide. Board Member Weil was very busy. He also asked me to pull back the deck by 4 feet, which also meant that we were pulling back the house structure by 4 feet. This actually did a very nice job of articulation, which is similar to homes in the general vicinity. Next slide. The last request that was made was to add 3 trees at the back elevation to mitigate the massing, which isn't that substantial, but we are proposing to add 3 pittosporums that would be maintained at the height of the eave. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quaratani. We'll open the public hearing now. Any member of the public wishing to speak on this property, please come forward.
first one and then I'll just talk to the second one. So can I have like, remove them one separately? Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm just gonna note, by previous, agreement, we are allowing Miss Lyle an extra minute, due to a second presentation that she's giving.
4 minutes, please.
Sorry, one of the neighbors could not be here, and so I'm presenting for her, and I thought I could have two 3-minute segments. I'm presenting for Chris Eto. This presentation is regarding the neighborhood compatibility, specifically 900 block of Baja Street, the homes on 5,000 square foot lots, the street facing lots, the same side as 950 Baja. The average home size is 2,857 square feet. The largest home is 3,082 square feet. 950 Baja is almost 4,000 square feet, including the ADU. The oldest home is 39 years old. All of these homes have had extensive internal renovations. All these homes also follow the design guidelines for hillside development. Next slide. This is 910 Baja. It's the largest. It's 3,082 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bath, well articulated, no overhanging balcony. Next slide. 930 Baja is 3,000 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bath, well articulated, no large overhanging balcony. Next slide. 960 Baja, 2,945 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, very well articulated. And I think I recall Mr. Kuratani commenting and saying how beautifully articulated this home is. And there's no large overhanging balcony. Next slide. 970 Baja is 2,400 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3 bath, well articulated, no large overhanging balcony. Next slide. Next slide. This is a newer home in Arch Beach Heights. It is 1100 La Mirada. It was built in 2019. It is 3,346 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, very well articulated, no large overhanging balconies. It protects the neighbor's privacy, retains view equity, and is neighborhood compatible. The next slide. 950 Baja, it's 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2 powder rooms, living room, family room, and a den. No articulation, privacy issues with the neighbor particularly next door, and it has overhanging balconies. The next slide. Visually, this shows the difference between a well-articulated home and a massive structure with only balconies that are staggered. This home is not compatible in this neighborhood with mass and privacy issues. It is challenging to push back a home with 5 bedrooms, 3+ bathrooms, 3 living areas, kitchen, and a dining area. And the Design Review Board has received many letters from the neighbors regarding this house. And actually, we have a lot of members of the neighborhood here. So if you could raise your hand, please. Thank you. So we're asking the Design Review Board to please not approve this project. Oh, I did in 5 seconds, with 5 seconds left. Okay. I also, the last time I was here, I provided a list of homes on 5,000 square foot lots. Mr. Kuratani claimed that many are 60-year-old homes. So I pared down the list to include neighborhood homes with specific criteria. Comparable home size to 950 Baja, between 3,500 to 4,000 square feet. The lot size, 5,000 square feet or larger, and recently built, not in those that were 50 to 60 years old. I came up with 5 homes. 895 Baja, 3,500 square feet, canyon facing. 995 Capistrano, 4,041 square feet, canyon facing. 1049 Baja, 3624, canyon facing. 1162 Baja, cul-de-sac, canyon facing. 1188 Catella, cul-de-sac and canyon facing. All these homes are basically the same size as 950 Baja, but they're built on a canyon, and the bulk of the home is actually hidden from view. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker.
Hi, Aisha McGuire here. I extend my gratitude to everyone for attending and investing your time. As this marks our third meeting, it's clear that our project concerns remain unaddressed and crucial adjustments are still pending. During our prior meetings, the board has provided explicit guidance to the applicant regarding necessary adjustments. These include lowering the house by a minimum of 2 feet to mitigate the mass and scale impact on neighboring properties. Another one, there's a notable issue with mass and scale, especially concerning articulation. The pulling back of the third level is essential as the current proximity to the street is inadequate. The addition of a mechanical pump poses no concern. Balconies should align with those of comparable homes, not one home, with square footage closer to the neighborhood average of 2,800 square feet. Significant scaling down of the house is imperative for compatibility with existing neighborhoods. Collaboration with neighbors is encouraged to address window orientation, setback, and height adjustments. Upon reviewing the board's guidance, it appears that the necessary changes definitely have not been implemented. The project remains oversized with a total developed footage exceeding 5,000 square feet, surpassing the lot square footage. In addition, we also have sought advice from a civil engineer who confirmed that there are no obstacles in lowering this project and incorporating a downward slope driveway. However, despite this feasibility, the applicant remains resistant to this idea. Despite our repeated attempts to reach out, Mr. Hugo is MIA. Mr. Steve's meeting with us yesterday, conveniently after all the plans have been submitted and finalized, proved very unproductive. Both should take a cue from Tom Berger's approach from the last meeting, we remember, prioritizing approval and actively addressing the neighborhood's concerns. It seems the board may have misunderstood my own family's primary concern regarding this project. While we've heard suggestions such as embrace the shared views, gratitude for the past experience we've had, or acceptance of inevitable construction, and that we have some kind of syndrome, the empty lot syndrome. Our main issue lies with the project's size. Lowering the project won't significantly alter our views, but it will totally impact its overall presence, mitigating the overwhelming mass and scale. This adjustment would prevent it from looming over us and alleviate the sense of being overshadowed. Approving this project would set a troubling precedent for future developments, potentially compromising the unique charm and aesthetic of our neighborhood. While our immediate view equity may not be directly impacted by this one single project, its approval could signal a shift that threatens our neighborhood's character over time. And I thank you.
Thank
for
you,
your
Mrs.
time.
McGuire. Next speaker, please.
Hi, you will know me. So I decided to, yesterday I have heard that my house is a problem because as a this angle. So I have Ken and Barbara McMurray that wrote a letter. They were the previous owners and the builders because Ken is a contractor. So they wrote, when we built our house in the early 1990s, Masonization was a key issue in Laguna Beach as homes were being rebuilt after the fires and mudslides. Much attention was paid to the right sizing of homes that afforded maximum square footage for owners, but sensitivity to neighborhoods with existing smaller homes. We designed our house on 2 separate axes, one perpendicular to the street, the other with the main living area at about 15 degrees off the alignment. The idea was to reduce the mass and scale and create a thoughtful and attractive structure and provide the neighbors with their privacy as well as retain ours. We always knew that the lot beside us would be developed, and we designed our home accordingly. The proposed house at 950 Baugh is well beyond the mass and scale, as well as the square footage of any of the neighboring residences. The buyer of our home, which is me, is rightly concerned about the privacy she would lose to the neighbor's enormous looming three-story structure whose design is stretched to the maximum allowable height and building setbacks. After reviewing the plans, it's clear that 950 Ba is not a home designed in keeping with the pleasantly broken up shapes of most of the other houses on the block. We found the design aggressive, unattractive, and the proposal downright unneighborly. It can and should be made better in myriad ways before a single spade of dirt is turned. And I think that this represents well my what I think, as well as many of my neighbors. And also, I want to point out to the board that I would have appreciated that the architect or Steve would have been in contact with us during these 3 hearings. And we haven't seen him. We only saw him yesterday for briefly.
Thank you, Dr. Borelli. Next speaker, please.
Dear Design Board members, my name is Oz. I reside 945 Catella Street, and I appreciate your dedication and time in serving our city, responsibility that involves navigating numerous projects, making tough decisions. Your role is very important in shaping our community. As residents of Laguna Beach, our collective expectation mirrors the wisdom shared by Oprah. Everyone needs to be listened to, heard, and understood. Unfortunately, regarding the proposed construction on empty lot on Baja Street, it feels as though these principles are not being honored. We were hopeful for a collaborative dialogue as recommended during the last board meeting, where it was suggested that project representative engage with neighboring residents. Despite our efforts, this interaction was markedly absent until the last minute meeting with my wife, Aisha, our neighbors, Emiliana and Paige. Our concern primarily lies with proposed structure's mass and scale, which as it stands will loom over our property, resembling more an apartment building than a home that harmonizes with the neighborhood's character. We have proposed shifting the garage to the opposite side and adjusting the driveway slope to mitigate this. After consulting with civil engineering firms, we learned that implementing the mechanical pumps, including the backup if one fails, could make this feasible, challenging the initial claim of impossibility by the project's engineer. Further, I have a couple pictures. Further, during the recent rainfall, we documented the water flow patterns on Baja Street that supports our stance, demonstrating minimal impact to the proposed construction size from the change we suggest. There's another slide next to it. So the flow actually goes to the other side of the street. As someone deeply embedded in the construction and design industry for over 24 years, supplying materials, a broad network of professionals, I discuss this project with clients who are architects, builders, and developers. Everyone I talked to was surprised and worried, and they think this project could change a lot of things in Laguna Beach if it gets approved. Laguna Beach is cherished, and its unique character and charm attributes a risk if we open the doors to disproportionate development. The decision before you tonight isn't just about the single lot on Baja Street. It's about preserving the essence of Laguna Beach for future generations. I urge the board to consider our appeal for modifications that ensure this project truly fits within our neighborhood, reflecting our shared values of community, respect, and understanding. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Oz. Next speaker.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Susan Bond, and I live at 955 Catella Street. So I'm directly above 950 Baja. I will just say that I will echo what all my other neighbors have said today. You know, I was not surprised that they were going to do construction. I mean, I wasn't surprised at all. It was going to come, but not to the scale. It's monstrous. I wake up in the morning, I go to my patio, it's going to be, it encompasses my entire back. that's not what I wasn't, that's why I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that there's going to be construction. And I think what I'm mostly concerned about is which my neighbors have already discussed, is the precedents. What will be the precedents for this neighborhood and this community that we live in? It's looks like hotels, that will be the scheme of the neighborhood. So that's what a lot of my concern is about, is the precedents, what will happen to this community. It's pretty large. It doesn't fit the scheme of the neighborhood. And so I guess I'm just happy that I'm here to be on the record that I basically will support this decision of us, not for you not to approve the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bond. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, the Design Review Board. My name is Anthony Smith. I'm Susan's husband, and we live at 955 in Catella Street. I think that we mentioned, or as it's been voiced this evening, that from the last Design Review Board meeting, we heard from the panel, from the board members, that the size and scale of this project could have some dramatic ramifications for other types of properties and developers that wish to come to Laguna. I think, the scale, just the sheer volume of the house on this lot size is something that we've all been quite concerned about. I've been a practicing industrial designer for nearly 40 years, and I've participated and led and managed complex, faceted programs with design review boards throughout my career. We have attempted to speak with Mr. Sawyer and have him actually visit us and actually get together as a group, as a community of neighbors, to actually discuss his proposals. And I think it would have helped very early on if Mr. Sawyer could have actually met together with us and listened to us firsthand, so that we could actually discuss our concerns with him. I don't know why this has not been possible. I think with any kind of review process, and as I say, I've been involved in many different reviews over nearly 40 years, there's always a dialogue between those interested parties and the stakeholders that have vested interests, whether or not it's actually in a product, or it's a home, or it's indeed people that are living in a site which is adjacent to something, or that may be impacted by the work of somebody else. So I would have hoped that Mr. Sawyer could have met together with us, because I think we could have actually discussed a lot more things instead of actually just seeing proposals put down on paper. Many of these proposals are coming very late to us, and we don't have the time to react so quickly or to study them. We're not architects, but on the other hand, we are open to discussion and to listening to Mr. Sawyer, and indeed actually Mr. Liu, who's the client. So I would again reach out to both of them if they have time, that they can actually meet with us so that we can actually look at this in further detail. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Further speakers?
Hi, my name is Dee Dee Westgard Pike, and I moved to Laguna in 1964 when I was a little kid, and I've seen a lot of changes, but it's still just so charming. And I've been on Catella for the last 14 years, and I walk my dog with about everybody else that walks their dog. And this project is not charming. It is an eyeful. Just seeing the sticks is an eyeful, but to kind of dive into it and see what else it's encompassing, I mean, it's like a hotel or a small little apartment for 3 or 4 families. As I was talking on my way in today, I was looking at the artist studios in the canyon. They don't belong there either. And this certainly doesn't belong in this neighborhood. And it doesn't belong in Laguna. Maybe on the set of a fraternity house or something, but I would like you to kind of look and see that it is the size and the scale of it is just does not fit in. And we're all neighbors, we're all friends, we have block parties, we have fun. During the pandemic, I had people singing on my deck for my neighbors. That's what it's all about, and we need to discuss it. And I haven't had the chance, but all my neighbors say that Steve and Hugo have not reached out to them, but they've tried to talk to them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pike. Further speakers?
So think of this project as a classroom. If somebody sits in front of you and they're taller than you and you can't see the teacher, they have to like if they stand in front of you, and you can't see the teacher, they have to kneel. And the same thing is with this project. So if this project is the taller person than all the other kids, yeah.
Understood.
Thank you so much. Do we have further speakers? There being none, we'll close the public hearing and return to the applicant for rebuttal.
Thank you, Chair Sheridan. I was mistaken. I was going to say it one more time. Hugo had the requisite meeting with the neighbors before I was involved with the project. I met with the neighbors. I was subsequently asked to meet with 26 neighbors a few weeks ago. And I told them I'd be happy to Zoom. But I really wanted to meet with the neighbors directly in back or on either side, the ones that were truly impacted. And they replied back to me. I was grateful that the two neighbors reached out to me and we met when our schedules allowed. So what I want to say, it's easy to cherry pick properties, saying one's uphill or downhill. It's very easy, but they're part of the neighborhood. Our project is 3 feet 9 inches below the maximum allowable. It's similar in height to the two adjacent properties. Our setbacks are larger than either property adjacent. And I did tell the two neighbors that I thought that Dr. Borelli's house was beautiful and it was very well articulated. What she failed to mention, I also said it would never be approved today. By putting a project at an angle, it's the only house in Arch Beach Heights that has that angle, which created a design problem, and it's also creating privacy and alleged view issues. I love her house. I like the McMurrays. I know she didn't design it. I know she didn't build it. But the fact is, as I said earlier, there are consequences when you build a house next to a vacant lot. And it's unfair to assume that you, as an applicant, cannot have the same rights as someone who already has a house built. So I'll finish up. Kate was right. This house is very well articulated. Yes, I came back late with 4 proposals related to landscaping, the steps, eliminating a deck and pulling the house back. I apologize for that. I didn't meet Board Member Weil until this week. We talked about it. I think they were good suggestions and I'm offering them as a condition of approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quaratani.
Just make a quick statement.
Please, Mr. Weil.
So yeah, in my discussions with Mr. Cortani, they were suggestions. Our conversations brought forward issues that neighbors brought forward, but in no circumstance, and even now.
He has the floor. Tom, please. Mr. Weil has the floor uninterrupted.
But in no circumstance did I make any, any determinations with Mr. Cortani or any preconceived notions on the project. I still haven't figured out how I'm going to go with this one yet. And I'm waiting to hear from my board members. So I'm taking in all the information, but I did bring forward the issues that were more prevalent and more precedent. Landscaping issues were some that we didn't talk about. And I just reminded Mr. Cortani about some of the Arch Beach Heights specific plans and that they needed, or specific plans that it needed to be more looked at. And he and the applicant team brought forward their dimensions and their proposals this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Weil. Are there any questions of,
I have just a real quick question. Between the second submittal and the third submittal, how much square feet did you reduce the house and living area?
You asked me the same question before. We just lowered the house. We did not pull it back. I believe that the board was misled at the second
I'm-
hearing because, let me finish, please, Counselor. I believe that the board was misled by the incorrect staking. Is why there was not further reductions.
Steve, I'm not talking about that. I just want to know how many square feet was reduced between the second submittal and the third?
I
it
answered
zero?
that, Board
Zero?
Member Gibbs. We did not reduce it further.
Okay, thanks. I just
You're
want to make
welcome.
sure. Let's kind of keep, tensions low here. We're objectively looking at this as the board does. So I just had a simple question. I appreciate a simple answer.
Questions?
do we have further questions for the applicant?
I have just a couple.
Yes, Mrs. Thelman.
Okay, so Steve, did you have an opportunity to talk to the neighbors about these recent changes you're proposing tonight?
Dr. Borelli asked me if, after consulting with the property owner and the architectural designer, if I could send her the plans. I did so, and I didn't receive any comment back.
Okay, and then the other question was on the windows on Ms. Borelli's, Dr. Borelli's side that face into her home. Were those changed in this last iteration?
Yeah, we were asked to obscure a large window that's in the kitchen area, which is a little bit unusual, but we did so. We raised up the sill and we obscured additionally a window that is part of a bathroom
And that location of the window is
towards the
fixed.
back
It's fixed, you can't move it?
of the bathroom.
No, I think you said the kitchen, right?
Well, that window's obscured now, Chris.
But can it be moved?
Anything's possible, of course, but it's where the kitchen's at.
Okay, but that, I believe that's the window that faces Dr. Borelli's home. Is that
It-
correct?
That's correct.
It's right into her home. Okay.
It doesn't look into her home because the window's obscured.
Okay. As far as landscaping, I really don't see a lot of landscaping other than now this new iteration with the Chinese grass. And was there a landscape plan submitted? I didn't,
There is, it's towards the back of the,
my apologies. I need to look at it.
do you want me to review?
No,
Okay, thank you.
that's my questions.
Any further questions of the applicant?
I guess is there, because when I look at photos of the two homes directly in back on Catella, I mean, they're exposed, they're fully exposed. And typically in these scenarios, there's a retaining wall that you wouldn't be able to see the first floor of the home behind you. And I noticed with Mrs. Borelli's in the back, there's a retaining wall and a flower bed that covers the home behind it on Catella, from what I could tell, 100%. I don't know if they look over Mrs. Borelli's or not, but I guess I'm just curious because right now it's fully exposed. So would they be looking at the back of the house on the second floor, but on that first floor of the homes on Catella, what would they be looking at?
They're going to be looking at drought tolerant shrubs that vary 2 to 5 feet tall. You want me to go over them specifically?
I don't need
Yeah,
specifically.
there's 2 planter areas
Review.
there, Jessica, which are built on keystone walls. And so the angle of view would be looking at these shrubs. And we have added 3 additional trees to the back. And I guess I'll take the opportunity while you're asking me Board Member Weil made suggestions. I'll just put it on the record. He made suggestions with no promise on whether he would support or not support the project. I don't think any board member would. Thank you.
Well, can I
Mr. Weil.
touch on where this was coming from? So in the Arch Beach Heights specifically, when it comes to landscaping, number 12 is landscaping shall be used in front and rear yards to relieve solid, unbroken elevations and soften continuous wall expanses. Since we're late in the season and there were so many changes earlier in the hearings, 1 and 2, landscaping is usually one of the last things we talk about because there's modifications to the building and there was so much to do there. I just told Coratani that it seemed to be overlooked because there was nothing on the plans that was anything higher than 3 to 3.5 or 4 feet. And I was like, is that a miss or is that what you guys are really shooting for? Because when you look at all the neighbors' houses, there's plantings in the backyard, there's along the fence line. And in most Arch Beach Heights, there's plenty of plantings in the front yard too. And so it was a miss and I just brought his attention to it.
My thinking is, let's see where we go in deliberations and whether we're going to get to the point of enhancing the backside there to make sure that there's privacy between the properties. If we get to that.
Are there further questions of the applicant?
Just, I guess real quick, Kate, what's the lot coverage on the site? And then what's the standard for like lot coverage in the hardscape and kind of what's the standard for Arch Beach Heights? Sorry to throw that on the fly.
So the proposed lot coverage is 37.36% and the max is 41.75. So they're under the maximum lot coverage.
In total permeability?
They're proposing 41.11%. There's no maximum specified within our code for hardscaping.
Thank you.
Further questions of the applicant or staff? Let's bring it back to discussion deliberation. Who'd like to lead off? Mr. Gibbs.
Kate, can you put up the slide with the 3 versions of this project? I'll wait till that slide gets up, but I'll point out this is the 3rd hearing. So if we can't approve the project tonight, it fails. And my focus is going to be on neighborhood compatibility and particularly mass and scale and to some basis on design articulation. Yeah, do you have, oh, there we go. Okay, so this is the project through the 3 different hearings. From the first hearing, it was mass and scale was the primary issue. At the second hearing, mass and scale was the primary issue. And I made, very clear from my point of view that this project was too big for a 5,000 square foot lot and that at a minimum, the upper story needed to be pulled back. It was too big from mass and scale from the look, the closeness to the street, and square footage. And one of the public comments was on the square footage, which I think was accurate, which is this is the largest house for a 5,000 square foot lot on the upper side of the street. And so I only speak for myself and I'll let the other board members speak. I was very clear, I went back and listened to it, that in my view, the 3rd story had to be pulled back and the square footage reduced. And I think you can see from the first, second, and third hearings that virtually nothing was done on scale and mass. And nothing was done in pulling back on the third floor, and nothing was done in reducing square footage. I don't think the applicant complied with the board's direction. The late submittal, and I'll pull out the submittal where 4 foot was pulled back just on the bedroom side, so it's on the left side of the building, about halfway where the balcony is. I'm concerned it's a little too little and a little too late. And it certainly wasn't staked, and nor did really, I think the neighbors have time to really analyze it. I also think it's, from my point of view, woefully inadequate, and I'm going to be explaining why. I think as reflected by the number of neighbor complaints on mass and scale, they perceive an issue, and I think there's some substantial support for that. So if you could, Michelle, grab up the photos. And I'm going to describe how I think neighborhood compatibility applies, how those guidelines applies to this project. That's not the first one. The first one was go to the first one. Oh, is that the first one? Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure that was the first one, but I will go through. I went to 3 streets, Baja, south of Capistrano. All these were south of Capistrano. Baja, the next one up was Catella, next one up was La Mirada. And there's 2,500 square foot lots and there's 5,000 square foot lots. The one on the left is a 5,000 square foot lot, and the one on the right is a 2,500 square foot lot. Next slide. Yeah, these are the second batch of slides. I wanted to do no. These are the wrong slides. You'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, this is the first slide. So this is a 5,000 square foot, and these are representative. I went up and virtually everyone fit this on the upper side of the street. This is a 5,000 square foot lot, and you can see garage, the second floor jets out, and the third floor is back. Next one. This is another 5,000 square foot lot on Catella. You can see that this is not as high, spread out, 2-story. Next one. This is another 5,000 square foot lot. You can see here that it is articulated, does not cover the whole lot, and is 2-story in appearance. Next one. I should have one more, but this goes to show the 2,500 square foot lot, which are a lot similar to the proposed project. And that's one. You can go to the next slide. And this is on Catella. This shows a series of the 2,500 square foot lots that are fairly similar to the design of the 5,000 square foot lot that you're proposing. So now I'll go to the guidelines. We'll start with the neighborhood compatibility. What is the compatibility determination? What is the neighborhood? And that's under Chapter 11, and it reads, careful analysis of a site is necessary to establish the nature of the neighborhood in which it sits. A neighborhood can be a street, a block, or a whole section of town. So where I see the compatibility in the neighborhood is what I've shown you, which is, again, south of Capistrano, Baja, La Mirada, and Catella and La Mirada. I think if you go on the other side of Capistrano, it's the same thing, but just the design where that neighborhood is, those neighborhoods are, that's a very compatible neighborhood. I see that in that neighborhood, there's 2 primary types. There's the 2,500 and the 5,000 size lots. And as I've showed you, there's a difference in what we're seeing between how things are constructed there. So now I'll go to how you determine compatibility based on the guidelines. And they read, Each project should be designed to contribute distinctively to the character of the neighborhood and to avoid negative impacts on the surrounding properties. The result should be a rich variety of unique architecture and landscaping, sharing the qualities common to the neighborhood. 11.4, design. These are design objectives. Design a unique building that reflects the best qualities of the surrounding neighborhood. Choose an architectural style that respects the predominant massing scale and level of articulation in the neighborhood. And I'm going to come back to that because it talks about what is the predominant massing in the neighborhood. It goes on in 11.8 as to design objectives. When building mass is a component of the character of the neighborhood, new development should complement the typical building mass in the neighborhood. Design, and this is 11.8, design new development in such a way that visible mass conforms to the scale of the neighborhood. And with respect to that scale, I think you have to consider the nature and the progress of development in the neighborhood as I've described it. And it's very clear that the 2,500 square foot lots have one type of development and the 5,000 square foot lots have a different type of development. Because of the size of the lot, the 2,500 has a lot of massing up front. 3 stories, there's a lot of those with a garage, and then 2 stories that are flat, stacked on top of each other. But the 5,000 square foot lots don't have any of that until your proposal. So you've got to ask yourself, why? Why is that the pattern of development? And I think it's very clear that whether it's happened organically or intentionally, it was to break up those neighborhoods so that the small lots could have a lot of mass up front, but the larger lots, the 5,000 square foot lots, would break up the neighborhood. And it really does. As I drove those streets, if it was all like, if all the 5,000 square foot lots were built like you're proposing, like all the 2,500 square foot lots, it would look like one block wall along the street. And I think that that changes the neighborhood. If we allow this project and find that it is compatible, even though it's not compatible with not even one 5,000 square foot lot, I did not find one that was compatible. In fact, most of them were far less, even the newer construction, as I think was shown by one of the speakers, by Paige, I believe. To allow a 5,000 square foot lot to contain the mass and scale upfront stacked, like the 2,500 square foot lot, would totally change that neighborhood. And if we were to allow it in this case, we would, it over time would change the nature. And for the people who did not design their homes that way, for all these years that neighborhood has been building homes, you know, I'm really concerned that that would be a bit of a slap in the face because they kept with the design characteristics of Arch Beach Heights in how the 5,000 square foot lots were going to be designed. I am not surprised that the massive neighborhood complaints, I think there's 17, and everyone had the same comment, mass and scale, mass and scale. So in light of that, I just don't think that it complies with the guideline for neighborhood compatibility. I also don't think it complies with the guideline for design articulation, which includes the following. The mass and scale of the proposed resident must be compatible with existing development in the surrounding neighborhood. If you look at the 5,000 square foot lots, they have a lot more articulation than what you're proposing. They have different levels. It's a lot like the Dr. Borelli's property. They all are interesting, designed with different levels and different setbacks. And I was hoping that you would come back with something, you know, maybe pushing the envelope, but does something interesting at the 3rd level to make it look like a couple of the ones that I showed. But it didn't happen. So in light of that, I cannot support your project tonight. If it looks like you have the votes, then I do have some view and privacy issues, view equity. Well, I'll say that now. I don't think there's a view equity problem here. I think the Catella properties have amazing views. It's not being impacted. And I don't see view equity being an issue on the property at 940 or 960. Privacy, I echo what Board Member Fallman had to say, that we need to make sure that those windows are placed in such a way that minimizes impacts. There, I do believe, with respect to privacy, you have the vacant lot syndrome problem. But I don't think you get to those issues because I can't support neighborhood compatibility and design articulation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Vice Chair Gannon?
Yes, great, great comments. And I unfortunately, for the most part, agree, except for if we had one more hearing, I would have come back with my own photos that would show how this is neighborhood compatible. There are 5,000 square foot lots there that have similar style. I don't believe that this style, it could create massing, and I can see that argument. However, with the deductions and your deck and bringing the house in 4 feet and then opaquing the windows, for me, this is fully neighborhood compatible. When I look at this house, all I think about is Arch Beach Heights. View equity, I agree, view equity has been achieved. Privacy is a hard one on this one. So Mrs. Borelli's home, absolutely incredible. You had a phenomenal builder architect, the McMurrays. I'm dear friends with them. They built a house for the moment and not for the long haul, not for the duration. And I'm very sensitive to that. When I got to visit your home the other day, it woke me up in the middle of the night that evening. I was thinking about this one, and I do want to make sure as best as we can, protect the privacy. I think making those windows facing towards you opaque. I think the entry, the sliders need to be opaque as well. Bringing the stairs up. I understand the neighbors with the garage, switching the garage. I don't think that would change anything as far as the appearance of mass or scale. But when I look at this project and I walk through and drive through Arch Beach Heights, aside from the immediate neighbor, it is neighborhood compatible to me. And then when I go up the hill and I look down the street, it fits with the hillside. And then when I walk the property and I go to the back of the property, yes, the 2 houses on Catella are fully exposed. But if the house behind Mrs. Borelli was exposed, they would see the exact same finished floor plan that Mrs. Borelli has. The other thing that I noticed when I walked on the lot, when I stared at the staking and lined it up with the other properties. So Mrs. Borelli has a squared off section on the hillside, on the upper hillside. If her house was neighborhood compatible like the rest of Arch Beach Heights, it would be squared off and everything would be completely in line. The faces would be in line. And then also when I look at the house to the downhill side, it's actually from the staking, it's stepped back a little bit. I see the house on the downhill side protruding forward. As far as height goes, it fits with the hillside perfectly. Yes, it is higher than the south hillside, but from the back, it's in line with Mrs. Borelli's, maybe a foot lower. I don't, let me keep looking at my photos. Oh, and as far as setbacks go, your side yard setbacks, I don't know another 3 section of houses that enjoys the amount of setback that you guys have. It's typically 4 feet and you guys have an abundance of room between the 3. I'm pulling that back, looking at my photos, that would preserve Mrs. Borelli's view, side view towards the left. The biggest concern is her bedroom. So she's got that outdoor seating area, patio area that, again, this home was built without the future, thought of the future. It was built for enjoyment for the then, the now. And yes, it has incredible articulation and the design is spectacular, but to impose a similar design on the property next door, I don't think it's practical. But what is practical is protecting her privacy as best as we can. And doing that with the hedges, doing that with the stairs being pushed back, doing that with opaque windows. I believe this is an approvable project, and I support staff's findings for approval. With the changes that you proposed, only enhances privacy, only enhances articulation. The strawberry doors, I think that's all I've got for now. Go ahead and speak and I can add if I think of something.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem. Who would like to go next?
Next. Well, to reference one of the speakers, if the teacher's in the front and you can't see her, sometimes you got to move the desk over a little bit to the side and stagger them so that you can see over them. And I think that's part of the problem here. There's no place to stagger the home. Steve, some of the issues that you brought up for changes tonight, I think they were good changes. And I think from what I heard from the neighbors' complaints, where they would address those issues, and in particular, pushing the stairs back. I think you said 17 feet, which would be significant, which would address, I think, Dr. Benelli's, Benelli's concerns. I'm happy to see that you address the glazing issue, which was one of my major concerns in the beginning. I'm still concerned about the windows facing Ms. Benelli's home, that I wish they could be moved, or what do they call the skylight windows, something that lets in light, but you can't see in. I was happy to hear about the wraparound deck being removed and moving the deck back, and I'm assuming you mean the top deck or the second deck, upper deck, moving that back 4 feet, I think it was, which adds to the articulation of the home. So I think these were all good suggested changes that address some of the neighbor concerns. Unfortunately, they didn't have an opportunity to hear them. And now we're designing in the 11th hour at the third hearing. And so I always feel uncomfortable with that at the last minute. So, normally with something like this, I could say, well, I don't say view equity concern. I think you're addressing some of the issues that have been addressed, unfortunately, a little bit late. But at this point, I can agree with Board Member Gannon to support the project. My biggest disappointment is the early neighborhood communication, which I wish would have occurred and would have avoided a lot of this tonight. So,
Mr. Weil.
Yeah, so this one's a tough one. So I want to start by going back to the staff report, and this is kind of where I started with this one. On hearing 2, we gave them roughly 5 or so directions. Make further reductions on the 3rd level, north side and west front end of structure. Reduce overall height, which I think was achieved. The first one I didn't think was achieved within their original drawing set. Further reduce of square footage. There was no, in the original proposal for tonight, there was no reduction in square footage. Incorporated additional frosting glass. You did accomplish some of that. And then mitigate privacy concerns. And that was still somewhat questionable, especially as we were kind of visiting sites and speaking with neighbors further on where the initial proposal for number 30 hearing started. As for myself, my notes, hold on. The issues on this one where we left it was privacy issues, landscaping, articulation, and neighborhood compatibility. Amber, I sent you one photo or a couple photos. If you can pull up one of the couple of neighboring houses while I kind of go with this. In the last hearing, we did talk about height and we gave pretty specific marking. And I think Tom Gibbs mentioned it. The height of where the roof is at now is in line with the 2 neighboring properties. That I find pretty consistent within Archbeach Heights. And I know it's hard on the neighbors in the back behind it, but that is in line. It is below the max height. It is reduced. I think we did determine that that was view equity was achieved. When we talk about neighborhood compatibility and articulation, mass and scale in a specific plan, design review, chapter 15.1, locate and design new buildings or site development to facilitate view equity, anticipating future views, neighboring potential development, and to vacant lots and underdeveloped land. I think Tom brought that up or Tom and Jessica brought that up, that the site to the north, Amelia's house, it's angled. That does create some challenges with the site. So from my perspective, I've got to take in, some balance within that existing layout, but also balancing the right for development of this site. And one thing I really wanted to look at was that photo you had in the other house. It'll come right back up. But I want to showcase the next one, or the other house. There was a part to this one that I'm going with. So in this house, you can see that it's got some design relief. It is stacked. This one's a smaller lot. But if you look at the house just immediately to the left, you've got those upper story windows. I don't know the history of where these two were built, but in relationship to the two houses, they were built in somewhat harmony, where this one provided a little bit of relief for that one, or that one built to a certain spot where it could achieve its view and didn't block privacy or didn't create privacy benefits. It's not the greatest example, but it was one just up and down the street. But it does have some articulation where the mid-levels do angle and kind of offset as they face the street. Again, this is a smaller application. The other one, which is the one right next door to this one, also kind of has some setbacks in the upper level that provide this house, views across its upper level and deck, and its windows are well placed. But its articulation from the street has a lot more jogging, stepping back, and juxtaposition. As you can see, the ground level with the garages is pretty flat and even, but then you got windows on the left, and then the setback deck in the next level, and then you've got two different planes on the upper level. With the house that was proposed, it was a challenge because it is pretty flat on the front, flat on the second level, flat on the third level. And so that was one thing I did ask the applicant to really take a good look at, because where was it? Not cover that, because the articulation needed to be more. It needed to be more. When you talk about Archbeach Heights standards 25.35.80 B, number 2, while individually designed should be achieved, the thrust should also be scaling down rather than duplication existing bulk and size of existing structures. So in the event, so what I take from that is, in the event that there's some, conflict, you as the builder need to try to reduce and create balance in some of that scale. And I don't know if that was achieved with the original submittal for tonight. Landscaping, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it was a miss. It did not meet the Archbeach Heights specific plans, or even design review guidelines. It is Archbeach Heights specific plans, same section, but 11, 12, and 13. The biggest one was landscape shall be used in the front and rear yard to relieve solid unbroken elevations and soften continuous wall expanses. Because there wasn't much, and especially in the back, it doesn't provide that relief for that long flat plane on the back part of the wall of the structure. The other part of this project that is somewhat interesting is the 4-car garage. And I think we do have to make a finding that that doesn't add to mass and scale. I think it works, especially because the Archbeach Heights specific plan calls for something of roughly 400 square feet of storage or whatever in offset in that garage space. And I think you're at like 600 or 800 square feet. So you achieve that within the goals or the guidelines from the plan. So the 4-car parking spot works for me. The way Chris, Board Member Thalman described it, I think these changes are good that you're trying to propose here in the last hour. I wish it had been done coming into this meeting, because they're really, to Tom's point, not significant changes that were really following the full length of the board. I'd like to see this I'm not supportive of where it's at tonight, but I like the direction it's headed. I wish it was a little more dialed in so I could make a really solid approval for it. But I'm just not there. So, hear the rest of my board members and we can see where we go.
We've heard so much about design articulation, and in the guidelines, much of what's been presented to us in these guidelines are incorporated into this plan. Unfortunately, we can't make a decision personally on whether we like a design or, it's our personal style. It does meet with, according to everything that I see in front of me in the guidelines with design articulation, this property does meet the design articulation. In meeting yesterday with Dr. Borelli, her main comments were that stairway, pulling back the stairway, and that jog on that first level where her secondary bedroom had a privacy issue with that deck. And Mr. Quaratani has proposed fixes for both of those. As far as the view equity is concerned, Ms. Dahlia, would you please bring up the photos? View equity is achieved. It's been achieved. This is interior view shot of Dr. Borelli's house. This shows no incursion of view from the applicant. This is a full-on ocean view. Next photo, please. Again, no view incursion. Next photo, please. Again, no view incursion. This gives a perfect example of why this house would not be approved today. This is Ken McMurray's 15-degree slant towards a vacant lot. And he knew exactly what he was doing because the house in front of it, if he had not done the 15-degree, he would have been building behind a house and taking less view. So Ken knew exactly what he was doing. And this is the reason why this house could not be approved today by this design review board. But there's no view impact here. Next photo, please. This is a situation that has been remedied by Mr. Quaratani. If you look far, this is the extension of the deck, which I believe that was part of your submission, that has been eliminated. And then her big problem was that stairway, which again, he has brought a solution to bring that back 17 feet. Next photo. Upstairs bedroom, again, look at the amount of view, measure the view. This shade is pulled down so you can see practically all the way to Maui on that window. But this one over here, there's not 50% of the view is taken, and it's not fully occluded. So there's no view. The view equity issue in this room, which is an office, by the way, that's met. That's not a main ceremonial room. Next photo. Here again, no view issue. Next photo. Here again, this is in an angle. Yeah, that shows that there's going to be a house next door. There again, this is part of the 15-degree cant from the original design of Mr. McMurray. And if that had not been there, it would have gone this way, and that house would have lined up that parallel with the other houses on the street. Next photo. Now we're on Catella. This is the upstairs view from the Smith's deck. As you can see, on the bottom string line, look at the amount of view. There is no incursion into the horizon line view. There is a massive amount of blue water view. There's that's it, the from Page's house, the roof lines line up. So view equity is achieved on the Smith property. Next photo. More view. This is looking south from the Smith deck. No incursion of view. View equity is there's you don't even see the house. Next photo, please. Here again, deck, massive amounts of view, all lined up below his deck. View equity is achieved here. Next photo. This is looking north. No, nothing with the view. The view is not impeded at all. Next photo. Next photo. This is at the Smith property, and as you can see from the downstairs, there's no fence across the property. So we can't say that we can't protect a view without a fenced yard. Next photo. Is that it? That's the end of them? One more. Here again, downstairs at the Smith property, no fencing across the back, and that would be looking at the back end of the house, and that's not a protected view. So all the arguments, of view protection, there's no view impact from the applicant's submittal. So the staff report has shown that the lot coverage is 37.36, maximum allowable is 41.75, and permeability 41.11. As we've approved many houses at that level. And as far as the neighborhood compatibility is concerned and the design articulation, it is compatible. There's nothing in design articulation that has to do with square footage. So I'm inclined with the changes that the applicant has presented tonight, which were what Dr. Borelli asked for yesterday. I'm inclined to vote approval tonight. So if there's any other discussion, or if somebody would like to make a motion, then we can proceed.
Sure, I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item this evening. It showed as 5.5, located at 950 Baja Street. The board has determined that the project is consistent with the design articulation, neighborhood compatibility, privacy, and view equity design criteria. Then staff to recommend board adopt resolution number 23-1274, approving design review 23-1274 for the construction of a new single-family dwelling, attached garage, accessory dwelling unit, and spa, subject to the attached exhibits A, B. Oh yeah, no spa. That's
The
right.
spa was removed.
That's right. No spa. Ixnay the spa. And can we approve an accessory dwelling unit? That's not our purview.
The ADU was not before the design review board tonight.
Right. So let me scratch that as well. I scratched spa and the accessory dwelling unit. Subject to exhibits A and B and adopt section 15303 categorical exemption pursuant to CEQA with conditions of approval. Does staff have the conditions of approval presented by the applicant?
We would request that your motion include reference to the exhibits received by Steve Coratani earlier today.
Okay, with the condition of approval to incorporate the exhibits, the exhibit presented by Steve Coratani that includes a dwarf strawberry plantings, removal of 3 feet by 12 of deck? No, thank you. And pull back the deck house 4 feet. Add 3 trees to the back, a pittosporum, maintain the height at the ridge. And if I missed anything, reference Steve's.
The plans that were submitted this morning by
Yes.
Steve Coratani.
Yes, the plans that were submitted this morning by Steve Coratani.
Do we have a second? I second that motion. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Mr. Lawyer, please call the roll.
Board Member Wild,
No.
Board Member Thalman,
Yes.
Board Member Gibbs,
No.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon,
Yes.
and Chair Sheridan.
Yes.
That is a 3-2 vote for conditional approval.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That will conclude tonight's meeting unless we have, do we have any committee reports, staff reports?
No further staff reports.
So we stand adjourned to the April, what is the next meeting that I don't have to?
April
know about?
11th. April 11th.
April 11th. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand adjourned until April 11th.